Okay, and we're live. So hi everyone, thanks so much for tuning in to this virtual trainee panel today. I'm really delighted to have these guys come along and to answer all your questions. We've had absolutely lots come across on the Slido, and hopefully this is going to be a really useful resource for you guys to learn a bit more about the firm, a bit more about law generally, and trainee life in general. So I think without further ado, I'd just like to thank everyone for coming and for taking part of this stream. It'd be great if everyone could kind of go around and introduce themselves to everyone that's watching. So Emily, I don't know if you want to get us started, if I could put the pressure on you first.
Yeah, I'll get us going. Hi guys, my name's Emily. I'm a second seat trainee, currently sitting in corporate reorganisations. My first seat was in financial services regulatory. I actually did a chemistry undergraduate at Durham and then did the VAC scheme whilst I was on the GDL with Alex. And yeah, really enjoying it so far.
My name is Alex. I'm also a second seater, so I think you notice a trend with the current panel. I have done banking for my first seat, and I'm in tax currently. So I've been since March. And at university, I graduated from University of Essex and did law and human rights.
Hi everyone, I'm Ollie. I'm also a second seat trainee. I was in financial services with Emily in my first seat, and I'm currently sat in structured capital markets. I didn't do law for my undergrad. I did history and then did the GDL and the LPC in Bristol. And then I actually applied, I didn't do the VAC scheme, I applied for a straight training contract at Baker McKenzie.
Hi everyone, I'm Tash. I am also a second seater, sat in tax, and I also did banking for my first seat. I did the vacation scheme with Baker's in July 2016, and before that I read history at Exeter.
Fantastic. So we've got a great mix today of, I think, all different kinds of backgrounds of people who did and didn't do VAC schemes. But am I right in thinking you all were in the same cohort for the LPC together? Or mostly.
Almost.
Yeah.
Almost. Okay,
except
great.
for me, yeah.
Right, fair enough. So it's interesting to see how everyone's come from different backgrounds and kind of all currently working through your second seat. I guess just a really topical question right off the bat, how is everyone adapting to working from home and kind of switching from office life to working in your little home offices or home setups, whatever they may be?
Yeah, I think at this point, so Baker's decided to work from home relatively early. So beginning of March, we had our kind of firm-wide email saying everyone work from home. So it's been about almost 6 weeks now. And personally, I'm adapted. I think it took a bit of time. And unfortunately, we had a coincidence of the day we started working from home, we changed departments. So that was kind of difficult and maybe took it a bit longer to adapt. And now I think more and more settled, kind of getting used to the department, getting used to working on a laptop, getting used to kind of having your Zoom catch-ups instead of your face-to-face catch-ups. So yeah, I think now it's all a bit more normal, but it definitely was a bit of tough to start with.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm amazed you remember that it was 6 weeks since you got started. For me, it's all kind of blurring together one after the other. But no, that's great that you've been sort of supported throughout, really. What about everyone else? What's your sort of working from home mantra at the moment? Any kind of unique routines or tips that you've been having to employ?
I'll probably just say that this is probably the first time I'm wearing a shirt for a good 3 months. Not that you're forced to do it in the office, because obviously it's pretty much dressed down all the time unless you're meeting clients. But it is, it feels quite strange being back into this.
Very cool. So I guess one thing that we really wanted to cover today was to hopefully give a bit of an insight into the firm and for you guys to cast your mind back to the application process that you went through when it came to applying to Baker's, be it for a vacation scheme or a training contract. I guess just a really kind of common question that I think a lot of students have asked me and that a lot of people want to kind of find more about the firm is just your general sort of motivations for applying. So that kind of classic interview question, what was it about Baker's that really kind of inspired you to apply, and what was it that you saw as their sort of unique selling point, really?
I think for me, like the main thing was the people, and I think it's a sentiment that you hear quite a lot with Baker's, which is like as a firm, it's such a lovely place to work, and who you work with are such lovely people to work with. And I kind of got involved in Bakers initially because I was in my final year of uni and I knew I wanted to go into a career in law, but I didn't know which firm. And I went to a dinner that Bakers hosted at my uni, and just speaking to everyone, you know, it was a really interesting, insightful evening anyway, but just the people were so lovely. And I was thinking, well, you know, if you're in a career in law, you know that you're going to be spending a lot of time in the office at times. And it was just really nice knowing that the people I'd be working with were people I wanted to work with, rather than kind of just a group of people who happen to be in a room because they all happen to be lawyers. There's a kind of sense of camaraderie and closeness that I think Bakers has, which is just a really, really great environment to work in.
Yeah, I completely echo those comments. So I think I actually started applying for kind of vacation schemes in my last year of university, which is quite late considering that I had a 4-year course. But one thing that really kind of distinguished Bakers was the fact that, you know, I managed to meet quite a few people from the firm, and even from the events themselves, there was quite a few people from the firm attending, which was really nice to get to meet people from different backgrounds and see how much kind of upward mobility there is. So there were people who kind of have worked in maintenance and have managed to progress up into kind of HR, into diversity. The firm is really, really open to kind of pushing up talent and letting them progress, which really stood out more so than other firms for me.
Yeah, so what's attracted me to Baker McKenzie was the breadth in areas of law that they did. You really can get the sort of full service. There's something for everyone, but the expertise that they have in all elements, they're really building out like the transactional banking and corporate sections, and they already have like very well established practices across employment, IP tech, especially tax. So there's something really for everyone. You get really sort of the best mix of work in the city. And I just echo what everyone else has said, that the feeling of valuing you as a trainee and enjoying the company of the people that you work with really stood out on open days that I went to, and that hasn't been the case. You know, it hasn't been interrupted since starting. It's really does what they market themselves as.
Fantastic. And I know we said at the beginning that everyone kind of sort of went through the application process slightly different ways, coming from kind of law backgrounds, non-law backgrounds, vacation scheme or direct application or something. When it came to that application and it came to managing either your interviews or writing things on the application process, what were your sort of tips that you would give to candidates to kind of go through that process, especially when it comes to Bakers as a firm?
I think this kind of differs from person to person. Personally, I wanted to apply to quite a wide range of law firms because I didn't really know what I wanted. Some things were fixed, so I knew I wanted to work for an international law firm. But in other respects, they all often sound the same online and they're very different in person. So I found it was easier to apply for lots of different types of law firms and make that decision a bit later once. As Tash found, you actually get to meet them more and you find that you actually really enjoy a particular group. So I had lots of spreadsheets going, and I'd have columns for all the different aspects of the firm, so I could be sure that I actually did like the sound of them, and there were ones that I thought was sort of slightly different as well. But I know other people disagree, and some of my friends have applied to sort of perhaps only 5 or 6 very similar firms, and that worked quite well for them as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with Emily that I think when you're applying, you're just looking at firms initially, they all kind of sound the same. Like even between big multinational firms and big national players, it's sometimes very tricky, other than the lack of national offices, to see what kind of the difference is. Oops, have we lost Ollie?
I'll try and get
but I think for me personally, yes, it comes back to Tash's point. It was the people. In terms of kind of tips when applying, it is really about getting to know people at as many events as you can. So that seemed to work really well for me. Just meeting people from graduate recruitment, trainees, follow up on those contacts, and that is relevant for any sort of approach that you make for a law firm. Just make sure that once you create contact, you maintain those and you keep in touch, because that's a great way for you to know how firms are dealing with situations like COVID, for example, or just in the firm in general, what's happening with them. Because what happens when GradRec is recruiting, they would be interested to know who you've met at events, and they do ask us as trainees, and like who stood out. So it's not about being forceful, but it's about being interested in showing that passion for the career. I think really does come across at graduate recruitment events.
Yeah, I think Alex's point on kind of meeting as many people as you can is a really good one. And, you know, firms will put on stands in different law and law fairs around the country, different unis, and, you know, there are insight days and there are open days on top of the other kind of internships you get, things like the vacation schemes. And also, you know, certainly with our HR department, if you have a question, email them. And I think that sense of creating a point of contact, even if it's asked like the most mundane of questions, like not a question that's necessarily going to be like, wow, this person, we should get them a TC because they've asked this insightful question. But the more you know about a firm and the more you kind of have interaction with the firm through the people who work there, the better idea you can have of it. I had the kind of opposite approach to Emily. There was no spreadsheet involved. It was more a very old paper list of like 4 different law firms that I thought I'd apply to. And as I said, like they just kind of struck out for me because they were like so friendly and so open, and the people I spoke to were so great. But without having those kind of personal contacts that you meet in places like a law dinner or a law fair, you won't get that sense of differentiation.
I think it's interesting to hear how everyone's kind of had slightly different approaches, but they've all seemed to have worked. So I guess what works for you and helps you through the process is really important. And then I guess the other side of the application, you know, eventually securing your training contract and starting where you guys are at now. I think a lot of law students don't always get so much of an insight as to what a training contract actually involves and what trainees kind of do on a day-to-day basis. So I know that it will inevitably sort of vary between departments. Just as a kind of broad question, what do you think your sort of average day-to-day is like when it comes to practicing as a trainee?
Okay, so I think it might think that it's quite different depending on, you know, if you're in the office or if you're working remotely. But actually, at least my personal experience has been that the tasks that kind of a trainee will do is kind of very similar. So the only thing that you're losing out working from home has been, at least for me personally, is that kind of daily interaction with the department, with the team. But in terms of the actual tasks that you do, you probably end up doing the same sort of things. And that is actually, the team is reducing.
We're down to 3.
God, down to 3. But actually, I think the type of work depends entirely on the department that you're in. But having been in one transactional department, so that's banking, and in tax, which is a big mix. So tax can be, particularly at Baker's, because it's quite a big team. You tend to do advisory, you tend to do contentious work and transactional. So you get to experience quite a few different bits. On a more practical level, here I've prepared kind of. Oh, everyone's back. So for example, I've prepared slides for a client detailing local council advice from different jurisdictions, and I've assisted the associate working on this in all sorts of different ways. Separately, I've worked on an advocacy paper for a dispute with HMRC. Don't want it to make it too technical, but it's basically for a client whose tax returns, you know, are being questioned for a particular period. So you're kind of trying to argue the side of the client as to why they think the tax returns were accurate, or what is known as their transfer pricing policy, which is how they price services between different companies within the group, whether that's been accurate. So all sorts of different different things depending on who you're working with, because it tends to be the case that the more senior the person is that you're working with, the more established practice they will have in a specific area. So you end up, the more people you can work with, the more varied work you will get. Like, it will be interesting to hear what everyone else has been doing as well.
Yeah, Ollie and Emily, by the way, the question was just talking about your experience as a trainee and what you do on a day-to-day basis before you left.
I think as you kind of said when you prefaced the question, Harry, like, it very much depends on your department, and it depends obviously who you work with, and it depends whether you're in the middle of a pandemic or not. I think I've had a similar experience to Alex because we've done the same departments, banking and then tax. Definitely in banking, you'd often get put on a project, and that would involve you having project to project a number of very similar tasks. So there were a number of like bread and butter trainee tasks, whether that was drafting a legal opinion or managing a CP checklist. But then on top of those default tasks that you have when you're on a project, you also have individual discrete tasks. You might be asked to do some drafting for something, or you might be asked to undertake research, or it really can vary. And I think although the nature of the work I now do in tax in comparison to banking is obviously very different, a similar sense of you have your overriding projects that you work on that, you know, your supervisor, your work provider, the senior associate, the partner will just fire an email to you and say that, oh, could you please do this, or could you research this point, or, you know, could you do this one thing that's related to this overarching project we're working on. And you'll also have capacity request comes around saying, hey, does anyone have time to research this like one point of case law that we think is relevant to this one case that no one else is working on, but we'd like to know. And so I think it's also a really useless answer to your question, because there is no default day-to-day trainee task, but what you can expect is to do a range of work. And as Alex said, that can only be enhanced by, you know, seeking as many different work providers as you can. But I think you can by and large kind of divide your task into two sections, one of which is your run-of-the-mill project work, all kind of hands on deck to get this one transaction done, this one case heard, et cetera, or individual tasks, which can be sometimes the most interesting ones because someone's just posed this kind of random query and you have to go out and find an answer.
I would say the same. There's obviously no sort of standard day or standard tasks that you'll get, and that's what helps make it so interesting, because you don't really know day to day what you're going to get. Some departments it's more obvious than in others. But for example, I was in financial services, which is all regulatory and advisory work, and that is a lot of ad hoc research. Often you'll get a call from a client, or rather the partner will get a call and feed the work down to you, and you'll have to research a particular point of law or a practical point or any sort of issues around what the client is after, and then feed that back to the partner in a way that they can then just flick that straight on to the client. So thinking about making it practical and commercial, as well as having the legal technical knowledge in there. At the moment in structured capital markets, it's far more deals and transactional, but it's really an unusual time to be a lawyer, and especially a capital markets in a capital markets seat. So we're getting absolutely everything in at the moment, from people wanting to close deals before too much craziness happens, although I think they probably missed the boat on that, and as well as restructuring deals and banks, whoever, hedge funds asking us about particular financial transactions that they've got ongoing, or if there's been a default and the events of default, and looking at the transactional documents and seeing how they all interlink and work with each other and what that means for the trustees or whoever your particular client is. So at the moment, I'm really enjoying that because I'm getting a massive mix, and that's involved some. I'm lucky to be involved in some sovereign debt restructuring. We've got a few clients that are that we're working with to help restructure the debt of sovereign nations, because they're struggling a bit at the moment, and it looks like they need a restructuring pretty quick in order to help the government and help the people of those those nations to battle through this pandemic.
I think we've given a good overview there of what Bakers is about, why you applied, and actually the work itself on a day-to-day basis. However, this is ultimately a Q&A, and we have been received really great feedback from people who are wanting to ask their questions. We've got a kind of wide-ranging response that people would like to ask you. But I guess as the first and most popular question that we've got from the audience is, what is sort of Baker's unique selling point, do you think, when it comes to how it stands out from its competitors and how it sort of sells itself to its clients and really distinguishes it from other firms?
I would say that for Baker's, other than its internal culture, which we've kind of talked about, when it comes to clients, the unique selling point and what really distinguishes the firm is just how much reach it has, how much experience the people working for the firm across the world have got, how many lawyers can be working from different corners of the world on this matter, and you know that whatever is happening, you're basically with Bakers, and everything is just so integrated. All the systems function well together. So that's, think about billing, for example. If you're instructing local counsel that's external to your firm, then you have all the billing considerations. How much do they charge? Is that in line with what you normally charge for services like that? There's so many hoops, administrative and otherwise, that you need to jump through. And I think that Bakers offers the possibility of servicing clients throughout the world without having to worry about those, and everything is just collated in one place. Everyone is just, a quick email away. We've got it's quite interesting because when you work at Bakers, when you speak to colleagues, because the firm is so big, when you speak to someone in your office who may be on another floor, so you call them, and someone, let's say, in North America, it feels exactly the same. It feels like you're colleagues with everyone in the firm. And I think that really, that kind of fluidity of communication is what really offers that quite unique service to a client. And just being market leaders in so many different areas is just the benefit of being a full service global firm.
Yeah, I mean, I think the internal culture is something that we now kind of consider to be such a non sequitur, because it's something that everyone brings up when they refer to Bakers. So kind of outside of that, I'd kind of agree and expand on Alex's point that I think the international aspect, it is, and you kind of hear this a lot in Bakers, but it is truly international. We don't just have firms that are full service but are really only 2 departments, and then the rest are supporters. Like every office we have is there for a reason, and there because there's business, and it's done entirely on a business need. Like I think it was our Joburg office was only set up within the last 5 or 6 years, because Bakers just knew that there wasn't a need for it from a business perspective, and when there was, then they created one. It's entirely done organically, so that the work you're getting there, and when you're working with these international colleagues, you're doing it on such a high quality basis, because everyone is there, because there's a purpose for it, and everyone's there. It's full service in London, it's full service in these areas as well. And I think because of that, the next point is just the opportunities you get, and it's a really kind of glamorous idea, this idea of going on an international secondment or a client secondment when you're a trainee. And it's super enticing. And it's a main reason that I applied to Bakers, is because they have such breadth, because we've got offices like everywhere. Your kind of scope for having these exciting opportunities as a trainee is just endless, even ignoring the client side, which is also pretty exciting. But it doesn't end when you're a trainee. And that was the main thing for me. Like you have the ATP, which is basically an associate secondment, and you can go away for a year, maybe longer, to a different office. And so the idea of just kind of being able to go to a different place, get stuck in that kind of home culture of Bakers, but in an entirely new business environment, in an entirely new geographical environment, that was super exciting for me. And yeah, I think one of the main ways that Bakers sticks out, because they can just offer such a high quality international experience.
Yeah, I would obviously echo that. The international aspect really sets it apart. I would just go back to my previous point that the quality of the work in all the departments also helps set it apart, because it really does have top drawer expertise in pretty much every department you look, which means that not only the international opportunities and the other opportunities to get stuck in as a trainee is good, but just the quality of work that you get, that you're given, and that you're given responsibility for, is just head and shoulders above most other places that I looked at.
I know that I'm personally wanting to do secondment hopefully when I join the CC, but any of you guys wanting to do that throughout your training contracts at all?
Alex?
Tash is laughing because if COVID has affected me in one way, then it was the fact that I might no longer be going to Hong Kong this summer. So this was meant to be, so I was meant to be on a 3-month secondment there, which is quite unusual for your second seat, but I think it just depends on, what your discussions with graduate recruitment as to what your plan is, what you want to do. But that's just how it happened to fall for me. And I was really looking forward to it, but because of travel restrictions and some, health risks, it's now, it's still a bit uncertain. Waiting to hear on that, but it's just always an exciting opportunity. You can do it at almost any stage of your training contract. You can do it quite flexibly, as in doing either 6 or 3 months, depending on the secondment offered, which is great, and it's a great opportunity, in my view, to meet those people that I was saying earlier. So kind of get to put a face to the name, and get to understand how the London office kind of works together with the other office, see what the office culture is like there, and kind of compare and contrast, see how it is. I think that's a brilliant way to understand the firm better.
So another really popular question we've had, I think it's because of the timing of the stream, is to do video interviews. So I know today, Alex, you said you've put on a shirt for this video thing. Clearly your first bit of video advice for video interviews specifically. But kind of casting your mind back to when you had your video interview, I think a lot of candidates find it a bit unnerving. It's probably a bit different to something they might not have even tried them before. What's your sort of primary go-to advice when it comes to managing the video interview, and how did you guys prepare for it?
Prepare the questions that you kind of know are going to come up. So you should always have a question or you should always have an answer to a question like, name a time you've overcome a challenge, or name a time you've worked in a team. Because even if they don't come up, the answers you'd use in this kind of question are also going to be applicable to other questions, examples that can be transferable. But I think also kind of prepare for maybe slightly left field questions, or if you can't prepare for them, prepare yourself not to be surprised. So I think on my video, my third question was just describe yourself. And it's at this moment when I'm just like, I don't do anything with my life. Like, what am I meant to do? I have nothing to say. And you have obviously something like a minute to prepare and 45 seconds to speak. And I spent about 38 seconds just being like, I clearly have no life. I can't describe myself. And in the end, and then I had a panic because I was like, oh, I like, spending time with my friends. And then I was thinking, oh no, does that look bad? So just kind of, I think the thing to remember with the whole application process is bakers obviously want to know, and every law firm, they want to know how competent you are and how good you be as a trainee, but they also want to get a sense of who you are. So try not to be surprised if they ask you questions that are maybe more towards the this is me as a person side compared to this is me as a potential lawyer side. Because if I'd have known you asked me to describe yourself, I'd have listed 17 hobbies on a massive piece of paper on my wall rather than the kind of floundering answer that I think I gave.
Yeah, definitely. To add to that, I would just say, just stay calm when you're on the video. I know it's nerve-wracking, but if you practice videoing yourself and speaking and sort of saying the sort of answers that you think you might want to or might have to give in the video interview, that really helps just settle your nerves so you don't get flustered if a strange or unexpected question comes your way. And just remember that if it does, then everyone is in the same boat. So the key thing is just to stay calm, and whatever you say, just say it confidently and coherently with a structure, and you're already halfway there.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Ollie and Tash really have been saying, is that, no one expects you to come with anything particularly insightful in 45 seconds. So I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves thinking that in 45 seconds we have to impress, whilst the reality is actually you are given those 45 seconds to show that you can structure a couple of sentences that kind of make sense and kind of communicate the point in relation to the question you've been asked. And kind of maybe leaning a little bit towards a different question there, but it just got reminded. It reminded me of what Ollie was saying, but in our discussion earlier. But for interviews generally, because it's very likely that in these times you would just be having them on the camera, you're having them on Zoom, you'd having them remotely, at least for the foreseeable future. So I think as a general interview tip, I would say, well, you keep thinking of, the firm's unique selling point, but like, what's your own? I would say that probably the most important thing you have to be thinking about, other than, understanding the firm that you're applying to, is what makes you different to everyone else. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a skill as such. It could be just a different perspective on and how you think about the law and how it applies to you personally. Because when you show a reasoned, approach to your career and a reasoned approach to how you see the law in general and the work of the firm, then it already distinguishes it from a lot of candidates who are so stressed about the interview that they just talk about everything that you can read on the website. And it's not about, it is about you. It's about what Ollie and Tasha have been saying. It is about you as a person. And my personal interview experience with Bakers was, I don't even think we talked about much of my professional experience at all. It was about hobbies. So, they do want to know that you're a well-rounded individual.
It's funny you should say that, because in my partner case study interview, I think we talked about like the Premier League or football for like 20 minutes towards the end as well. So.
Seems to be a very common one, that one.
I can't the partners, but
go to.
Yeah, no, it was sort of tacked on to the end of my case study, which leads nicely onto another really popular question we've had, which I think is, again, another area of the application process that people might not have practiced before and struggle with. So I don't know what your guys' case study was like for you, but mine was sort of reviewing a piece of documentation, then obviously speaking to partners. What was your sort of approach to that and your sort of advice you'd give to candidates on that front?
I'm taking two in a row, but it will be a very quick one. My scenario was understanding a board meeting, basically. So everything that you need, you don't need that much background. You just need a bit of an understanding, depending on, I think they've now removed it. They used to have a legal and a non-legal case study, depending on whether you have done law at university, but I think they've removed that now. So now it's just non-legal. But in my case, it was the legal case study, which asked me to try and kind of puzzle out how many votes would be needed to pass an ordinary and a special resolution, depending on who's present. And like, someone was ill, so they weren't there. So you have to just think a little bit. And it's simple when you look at it, but you have to consider the kind of the pressure that you're under on the day of the assessment. So you just calm yourself down. You got 50 minutes to read one page and kind of process through it. Just read it as you would normally, and probably even forget that you're in an interview. Just read it because it's interesting. That was my approach.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the exact or case study that was in my interview. I remember it had something to do with shareholdings, because there was one point where both partners were trying to like lead me towards answering, look at the percentage of shares, and I did not get this for the longest time. And they're really good. Like, also, don't beat yourself up if you like miss. I mean, this was probably the most obvious answer in the whole interview, and I didn't get it. And they will walk you through it. Like, partners take a different approach to it. Some people take, like a good cop, bad cop approach. Some people just like are open to having a conversation. They're all just kind of testing you to see not only how much do you know off the bat, but also how do you work through a problem. And, half, if not more than half, probably 100% of what we do in law in some capacity is problem solving. Mm-hmm. And so that's not only solving the problem in front of you in the case study, it's also solving the problem of, they've asked me a question, I don't know the answer, but they're also giving me hints, or they're giving me clues. How do I solve that problem based on this new information? And so, I mean, a depressingly long time later, I eventually got the percentage was the answer they were looking for. So just like, it's kind of slightly reiterating Alex's point, but just stay calm. It's really easy. I mean, I still get completely nervous whenever I have a sit down with a partner to go through something, because I'm instantly thinking they're going to fire me because I don't know what I'm talking about. And they never would. But I think it's easy to kind of get caught up and think, oh God, I'm not getting the answer right. They're going to judge me for it. I've messed this up. And you haven't. Mm-hmm. they don't mind if you don't know the answer. They want to see how you work through a problem. And they may even ask you a question that doesn't have an obvious answer, so they can see you undertake that analysis. So just kind of remain calm, remember what you've read. Don't be afraid to just read through another paragraph again. Don't be afraid to just ask for a couple more minutes to think about it, because this is all what they would ask in a real world situation. So this is the kind of skill they're looking to test in the interview.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's definitely really key. If you don't know the answer to something, and likely there will be questions where you don't know the answer, that's the point. What they want to see is how you would go about trying to find an answer. And just imagine that you're in their shoes and you are the partner of a firm talking to a client, and the client asks you something that you don't immediately know the answer. How do you respond? You wouldn't just start panicking and run out of the room crying. You would want to show the client that you would, go away and think about it, or that you would work through such steps. And as Tash was saying, the likelihood is in the interview at the case study, they'll sort of spoon feed you along the way, or at least point you in certain directions as to where you can go. And then it's about you making the leaps between the different dots and connecting them up to try and get to a reasoned answer. And yeah, exactly like Tash said, even if you think what you're saying is waffle or you're not really too confident, it's just about conveying the confidence, how you approach it in that situation, how you go about showing that you understand, and how you convey yourself. It's like if you were writing a memo to a client, you wouldn't just informally write something without punctuation. You would structure it in a coherent way, break it down so it's easy to understand. So try and think about it in that sense, in the way that you convey the message.
Sure. And then I guess taking that comparison to what you do when it comes to your case study and problem solving in that sense, we've had a question about how you kind of ask for help and get advice as a trainee. So a question was sort of asking, do you tend to ask your fellow trainees when it comes to how you solve your problems? Do you ask your seniors, or both? Does it depend on the situation? And how often do you do that?
I think it definitely depends on the situation. I think, how often do I do that? Probably every day. There are always going to be some things that you'll either go to the trainee who's been in the seat before you, or you'll go to a trainee who's in the seat with you, or you'll go to any other trainee you can think of because they've probably got an inkling. And I think those are generally the kind of more mundane tasks where partly maybe you've encountered something you've never done before, or maybe you're just thinking, I really want to go to a trainee first in case this is a stupid question with a really easy answer.
Mm-hmm.
That actually, I've certainly found in my experience at Baker's that people are always really open to you saying, look, I don't know, could you give me a hand, or could you give me kind of a signpost as where I should go? And especially at the moment, we're still in the beginnings of our current departmental rotation. And so a lot of the time you're doing a task that is the first time you've done it. And even if you've been a trainee for 6 months or a year or 18 months, you're still going into a new department every 6 months. There's still a lot to learn and a lot that's new, however experienced you've been. So I think, always turning to trainees on practically a 24/7 basis for certain things. But definitely going to associates, going to partners, going to your work provider, going to your supervisor, because in my experience, everyone's always willing to lend a hand, and also just lend a kind of clue of, have a look at this book. You'll probably find a good start there.
Yeah, definitely. I would also add the PAs. The PAs are a gold mine when it comes to help. And if you don't want to go straight back to the associate or the partner, and none of the trainees know that answer, or are too busy perhaps to help you, then definitely go to the PA. They're really, really great.
And also, just to add to the list to people to which you will, embarrass yourself to, is probably going to be knowledge lawyers tend to be an excellent resource. And that is something, they're just so open about talking about the practice area that they focus on. So you can learn so much from them. So if you, for example, haven't had a chance to catch up on some, recent developments in the particular practice area, then why not just arrange a half an hour call with a knowledge lawyer and have a chat with them? I actually recently did that with a even though I've moved into tax, I caught up with one of the knowledge lawyers in banking, and it was actually really insightful to learn what's been happening in light of COVID and what the main issues are, because you can then go and research, but at least you know what the department is focusing on. And knowledge lawyers tend to be at the center of kind of the new research and developments in the law, because they are the people who will be carrying that out. So yeah, definitely recommend.
And I guess that kind of point of help and asking others for advice leads into a point which I think a lot of students want to ask about, but obviously can't in the given situation with COVID, and can't always do that anyway when it comes to accessing these law fairs and open days. But just the culture of the firm, and when it comes to the working environment, what's been your experiences and your insights in that area?
In general, I think you'd find with any city firm, you'll be working hard. So that there's no question that if you're applying for a career as a lawyer, no matter where, you'll be working hard. But in the city in particular, you need to be prepared for long hours. And that has definitely been the case when I was in banking. And yeah, it does tend to be up and down, but it also kind of comes down to your approach to work. So working culture, it goes that far, but it's also kind of your own approach to the work. So do you constantly go out and seek more work? Are you personally aware of your capacity? Have you reached it? Have you surpassed it? A couple of weeks ago when you asked for those 3 extra projects that you couldn't handle there. So like, just think about what type of work you've already got and whether you're able to deliver on that. Because if you keep on taking more and more work, but you don't physically have the time to do it, then I think it's the time to start speaking with the other trainees, seeing how the work can be managed better. Because I think one of the biggest mistakes that I did when I first started was just take a lot of work on. And of course, it depends on different departments. For example, Ollie's in a department which only has 2 trainees at a time, I think. So it might just be the case that there's just no one else to do it. But if other people are quiet in the department and you've got you're having to stay until 12 o'clock at night, then you can reshuffle. You can speak to the people that you work with, and it's all about that teamwork. And Baker's really encourages that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think there is the working culture is you work hard, like as you would expect to with a very good law firm in a very well-regarded, Brexit aside, business undertaking city. So I think there is this expectation of hard work. I would say the thing that I like the most about Bakers, in my experience, and it's hard to judge at the moment, we're not in the office, but if I was working late on a transaction, and sometimes you just have to, because sometimes there's just a lot to do and there don't seem to be enough hours in the day, what I really like is, even though you're the trainee and in many ways you're lower down the ladder than a lot of people, there is no expectation that, oh, actually you just finished this task, but I'm actually just going to pop out to dinner. If your team is working on a transaction and you're working late, you are all in the office. So I'd have it where I'd be in my room as a trainee, the associate and the partner would be in their room, and we'd all be staying, and there's this sense of camaraderie and the sense of all in this together. And it sounds like a bit of a cheesy point, but it actually makes a real difference when you're having to when you're having to put your nose to the grindstone and work pretty hard. It's really nice knowing that everyone is working hard for it and everyone's going towards the goal. And then in the simple thing, yeah, you are always working hard, but then when you finish it and when you close that transaction or whatever, you then also, because you played an equal role in the hard work in closing it, you also get to spend like an equal role in the kind of celebration, pat on the back, job well done. So it's a hard working culture, but it's a culture that everyone shares, which means that you're being worked harder than everyone, and it also expects you to work as hard as the rest. It's quite nice.
Yeah, definitely. I would just add that everyone at all levels, so far from my experience, has been very, very approachable. So I haven't really felt scared to reach out to a partner or just to go and chat to one of them about something to do with work, or even just to have a chat if you see they're free, or if you want to go for a coffee, just ask some questions. Everyone's available and everyone's there to help you learn and to help you develop, because they're really interested in your development as a lawyer within Baker McKenzie.
Another question we've come in, going back to the application stage. So before you kind of undertook your trainee work, trying to get through as many as we can in the sort of 5-10 minutes that we've got remaining, comes to the cover letter. So again, I think a lot of students can get stuck on this point simply because it can be quite an open book, and you don't always get too much direction when it comes to what you should put in it, regardless of what firm you apply to. So it'd be interesting to see if anyone had a consistent or different approach. But when it came to kind of justifying that cover letter and writing out your sort of short transcript about yourself, what was your approach to that?
I think you
Alex, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, we might have a different arrangement on the thing.
I'm sure we will.
I was going to say that, although you say that there is no, it's an open book and you can kind of get what you want from there, there is quite a lot of help in terms of how you should structure a cover letter in general. And it's not to say that you should always keep it the same and you shouldn't be creative with how you write it. But I think it's always helpful to keep in mind, first of all, it's a page. So imagine what you want to say to the firm and to whoever's reading it in one page. So you've got a very, little amount of time. I think the Baker's one is only 500 words. Am I right in thinking that's something along the lines?
750, I think.
750, yeah, I think. It's not much.
No, it's not a lot. But the structure technically tends to be, is like, why law, why this firm, and why you? And you can express those questions in any way, shape, or form that you want, as long as you address them, because at the end of the day, that's what the reader will be interested in. So graduate recruitment are looking for, they can see all your grades, they can see what you've done, they can see your experience, but it's all a massive application. Like you guys know better than anyone how big those applications are, and graduate recruitment only has a very limited amount of time per application to review. So what you're trying to do is use the cover letter to signpost them to the areas that you want them to look. So the bits that you're most proud of, or the stuff that maybe the application didn't allow you to talk about, highlight them in there. That's my advice.
Yeah, I think those are really good points. The advice that I was given by someone at Baker's was, I was really struggling to answer the kind of why law question because it wasn't something I could really articulate very well.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a woman from HR. She just said, imagine if I asked you now as a mate why law, what would you say? And I kind of gave her my answer and said, right, exactly that. This is, Baker's obviously will have hundreds, if not thousands, of applications coming in. You want to be kind of as direct as possible, and they want to get this kind of impression of you. And there is no, in a sense, there's no wrong answer. So don't worry about writing your cover letter for it to be, Pulitzer-winning journalism, unbelievable essay writing. What they want is a really candid reflection of you. Mm-hmm. And I think in line or off the back of that, it's really easy it's good to research a firm. And, if you're applying to a firm, you should research it. And it's really easy to kind of fall into a trap of, look at all this research I've done on your firm. I really want to show how much I love this firm. I'm going to put all of this stuff about your firm in my cover letter to show you how much I've researched it, mm-hmm. which is good. It's good to demonstrate you've researched it. But obviously, Baker's already knows that it has international secondments and client opportunities. What it wants to know is, why is that important to you? Why do you think as a lawyer, you will be better as a lawyer for clients, better as a worker in the firm because of those opportunities? So I think, be candid in your answers, say something that's very true to what your instinctive feeling is, but also make sure you're tailoring what Baker's can offer to yourself. What are the opportunities it gives you? Why do you like that? Don't just list the opportunities and say you're interested. Everyone's interested in opportunities. Say why specifically, personally, you have this kind of reaction to it and this really kind of strong pull towards it.
Yeah, definitely. I would obviously echo those points. I think, does it not give you an example of a structure, sort of why law, why Baker McKenzie, and then a couple of points or maybe 3 points about what makes you a good lawyer? So definitely stick to that structure and make sure it's fairly evenly spread between the three. You know, you don't want to waste all your words on one section when you have another two to answer. And as Tash was saying, really just be honest and open with why you are applying and why you like law, why you like Baker McKenzie, and why you would make a good lawyer. And the key to that is just to evidence it. Just back everything you say up with evidence. You know, I like Baker McKenzie because I like this, this, and this, and then you like this, this, and this because you have experience in this part of law, or you have experience dealing with customers. Whatever it might be, you just have to back it up and show that it's personal to you and that you would fit in with the firm.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and just really briefly, one thing I want to just expand on that is Ollie's dead right in saying back everything up. And also, it's more important to put relevant evidence to something than it is to put exciting evidence. You know, we could have done like a 17-week project, like building a school somewhere, and that would look amazing from like team building and challenges, etc. But actually, you know, as amazing as that is, most of us don't get the opportunities to do that. But in your entire life, whether it's at school, whether it's in jobs you've worked, whether it's in other internships, you'll have had experiences which are relevant. And even if it seems like a really mundane thing to do, if you've learned something from it that is directly applicable, write it down. Because, you know, they're not looking for this like kaleidoscope of unbelievably fancy experiences. They're looking for how you've learned and progressed and how you can apply that to it. So I'd say, yeah, don't be afraid to use a mundane example. I used to park cars. I used to be like one of the people at a festival being like, come in this way. Like,
yeah,
teach me a lot in law, but it taught me a lot in terms of, you know, responsibility, working in a team, etc., etc. So just make sure your evidence is relevant, no matter how boring.
Yeah,
Totally
definitely.
echo those points. Yeah, I think a lot of people try to shy away from maybe embarrassing experience that they've had or stuff that they've had to do to earn money, when those are probably the most relevant and the most experiences that you've had that have developed you as a person the most. So I was a cleaner at university, and a lot of people would not mention that in an application. So think about applying to glamorous multinational businesses and you were working as a cleaner at university. But what did that teach me? It taught me that I really wanted to pursue this career, and I was willing to do what was necessary to get through education. I was getting up at 5 o'clock every morning to do that cleaning, to go to university and carry it out. And that just shows discipline. It shows determination. And those are the things that really make you stand out, I think. So don't shy away from the what you would consider embarrassing experience, because there's no such thing.
Yeah, definitely. Just to quickly add to that, like I worked in a clothing store, and I actually spoke about that on my application, and how you've built up skills through customer interaction, how you deal with customers that are perhaps not particularly happy with a product or service that your company has sold them. Those are really key skills that you've built up that you might not necessarily think of.
Fantastic, and a great range of experiences there. I'd give you all full marks in an interview for how you've explained it for Bakers. And I guess just as one final question as we're kind of wrapping up on the hour mark, I think regardless of what firm people might end up applying to, there will be people watching as well who might not have even decided that commercial law generally is for them. So when it comes to, I guess, describing your motivations for commercial law and utilising all of those non-legal and quote unquote different experiences, like you mentioned, what was your sort of approach generally to just that answer of why commercial law as a career?
I think it is a very personal question. A lot of people have been exposed to maybe some of the business side of things through their family. So my mum was and kind of still is an entrepreneur, although to a lesser extent now. So she used to deal with swimming pools actually in Bulgaria, and then she moved into the real estate business. And because it was her business, I was always kind of in a way involved in it, and I wanted to understand the workings. And I think law is a good way to understand many different businesses and kind of almost be an insider in someone else's business, because you're advising them as to pertinent issues on what's happening in their business, which I think is super exciting. It's very interesting being able to deal with such massive enterprises and understand what kind of issues push them forward, but try and link that to something that you're quite interested in. So maybe you've got a friend who is in a particular market, and then you've kind of gotten an interest in trying to understand the legal implications of that. Try and tie it to something, because it makes it just that much more interesting to research, and kind of going on to the topic of preparing for that question, because people just tell you read the FT, and Ollie is a big supporter of that, by the way. Like, he will talk about the FT for days, because it's a great resource, but it's also massive, and it's also quite daunting when you're first starting, and when maybe you don't understand economic theory as much. So choose 1 or 2 topics that you're genuinely interested in and follow them. Because when you do that, you then get a sense of continuity of what is happening for that specific topic, instead of kind of reading bits here and there, and it kind of doesn't tie in at all. Because when you read about a couple of things that really interest you, you can then talk about them with quite a lot of, you know, passion and interest at an interview, and it really shows. So in my case, it's the example that I always give, because it's the one that I use at my interview, was like North Sea oil, decommissioning of oil platforms, because I'm quite interested in the energy market. And that was something, because oil platforms are very expensive to decommission, and they don't make money for the business. It was kind of like, well, how do they, you know, why do they do it? And it's for environmental reasons. And it's also, how do they get away with different tax advantages? And you get into all sorts of different strands of knowledge from just one topic, which is a good way I've found to approach researching commercially.
Yeah, I'll be brief, because I think my bandwidth is now starting to struggle. I think for me, commercial law came down to 2 things. It was, number 1, the clients. I really like the idea of working in a career which is client-facing, and where you're constantly meeting new people, and you're developing those relationships, and you're problem solving, and people are approaching you with an issue, and you want to create a solution. And so that was really appealing. And the second thing is, with commercial law, is because it is relevant, and it does derive, you know, kind of in whatever discipline you're in, it's related to current affairs, whether it's, this is the latest tax legislation, how does this affect a company, you know, a big multinational company, or, you know, we want to do this transaction to build this railway somewhere in sub-Saharan Africa. You know, whatever you do in commercial law, it has a real world applicability that is relevant at that point in time. I just found that really exciting. I like to be able to work in something where I know it's got a relevance and an implication and an application of something that I could actually see and that's tangible.
Yeah, I would say the same. Just if you can relate it to something that you're genuinely interested in, and as Alex was saying, it doesn't have to be that you read the FT cover to cover, and just something that you are genuinely interested in, it will really come across better. So for me, I'm a bit of a nerd for that sort of thing, and I was really interested in the 2008 financial crisis, and at the time I just started to learn more and more about that, and how the law underplayed a lot of the financial products, financial services sector in general, and my interest grew out of that. And so I spoke about that at my interview, and just be prepared that if you do speak about something like that, then you're going to get questioned on it, which is why it helps if you are genuinely interested, and you can genuinely have I'd say a conversation on it, rather than you're not going to get grilled. Well, maybe at some firms you will get grilled on it, but at Baker's generally they try and build out a conversation rather than a one-way question answer.
Yeah, fair enough. It's really funny you say that as well, because that's actually what I wrote my dissertation on. So it's good to meet someone else.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
About the 2008 crash.
Oh no, this would be lunchtime conversations every day.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Cut this short before it's just Ollie and I going back.
Should we just go? Should we just?
So Ollie's just like, is that bedtime reading?
He does have economic theory by his bedside. Ollie does.
Wow.
Economic theory. It's just Stiglitz.
It's just Stiglitz.
Oh, dear. Well, I guess that's the one question answered pretty succinctly, especially for Ollie there. But just generally, guys, thanks so much for coming on the stream. It was great to speak with you and to hear your sort of insights and answers to these questions. I'm sure it's been really informative to everyone who's tuned in. So thanks again for coming on and for taking part. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having
No
us.
problem. Thanks for having us. Yep.